Hi, I'm Nick.
And I'm Andrea.
And today we will be presenting a critical analysis of the 2007 study performed by Diamond, Barnett, Thomas, and Monroe titled Preschool Program Improves Cognitive Control. The study examines the potential benefits of an executive functions-based curriculum in preschool. In order to begin, we will first define executive functions. This term refers to a system of neural networks which control and manage the cognitive processes implicated in self-regulatory thought and goal-directed behavior. While theorists have criticized executive functions for being poorly defined and overly multifaceted, factor analyses suggest that this construct is essentially comprised of three main components of cognitive functioning. One, working memory, which refers to the ability to hold or maintain information in mind and be able to mentally work with or manipulate this information. Two, inhibitory control, which is the ability to resist an inclination to do one thing in order to do what is most appropriate or needed. And lastly, three, cognitive flexibility, which is the ability to adjust to change demands or priorities in an appropriate and timely manner.
While executive functioning is rarely taught explicitly in schools, the authors of the present paper suggest that it both can and should be done. Diamond and colleagues go on to mention that high executive functioning is related to academic achievement and school readiness, while low executive functioning is related to problems such as ADHD, student dropout, drug use, and crime. Furthermore, children from lower income families tend to have disproportionately low executive functioning scores. The present research question was, does the Tools of the Mind curriculum lead to greater improvements in executive functioning skills in preschool-aged children compared to matched controls who received a standard curriculum?
In order to address this research question, Diamond and colleagues recruited 147 participants from a low-income urban school district. The participants were preschool-aged children with an approximate age of 5.1 years. Teachers and students were randomly assigned to two conditions, which implemented two different curricula, either the Tools of Mind curriculum or the district's version of Balanced Literacy curriculum. The Tools of the Mind condition was the treatment group, as this curriculum promoted the development of executive functions. It incorporated techniques for supporting, training, and challenging executive functions into all classroom activities throughout the day. For example, when learning skills of math, children were also receiving training in executive functions. The district's version of Balanced Literacy curriculum, on the other hand, was a literacy-based curriculum. This is a standard curriculum that teaches literacy in a balanced way to young children. No activities explicitly teach executive functioning skills.
In designing the study, a stratified random sampling of teachers and assistants was used in order to minimize any possible confounds due to specific teacher characteristics. The authors used a post-test only design where participants were randomly assigned to one of two groups, with only one group receiving treatment. Post-treatment measures were then taken, and all statistical analyses were then performed only on the outcome measures.
Outcome measures were administered at the end of the second year. These measures consisted of performance on a DOTS task and flanker task, both of which had various conditions, each assessing different components of executive functioning. In the DOTS task, a red heart or flower appeared on the right or left of the screen. There were three conditions: congruent, incongruent, and mixed. In the congruent trials, the child was asked to press a button on the same side as the heart or flower, while in the incongruent trial, the child needed to press a button on the opposite side. In the mixed condition, both congruent and incongruent trials were intermixed. The congruent and incongruent trials assess working memory and inhibition, while the mixed trials assess all three executive functioning components. In the flanker task, a circle or triangle appeared at the center of the screen, and a larger circle or triangle surrounded it. Both forward and reverse flanker tasks were used. In the forward condition, children had to push a button that corresponded with the smaller shape, and in the reverse condition, they had to push a button that corresponded with the larger shape surrounding the smaller one. Trials were either congruent or incongruent, meaning the smaller and larger shapes were either the same or different depending on the trial.
In order to analyze the results, multiple regressions were conducted, with performance on the task as the dependent variable and the independent variables being age, gender, curriculum, and years in curriculum. As shown in the current table, the models were significant for all four of the executive functioning tasks listed. However, follow-up t-tests revealed significant performance differences between the tools and standard curriculum children only for the DOTS incongruent, flanker forward, and flanker reverse. For the DOTS mixed task, not enough children passed the pre-test in order to conduct a multiple regression. Therefore, a logistic regression was conducted with the percentage of children passing the pretrial training as the dependent variable. From this graph, we can see that the tools children, represented by the gray bars, outperformed the standard curriculum children on 4 out of the 5 executive functioning tasks.
Diamond et al. Concluded that the executive functioning improvements would transfer to academic performance, and that executive functioning skills could in fact be taught.
Upon further analysis of the results, it must be asked whether the author's conclusions were in fact accurate.
In moving on to a critique of their analysis, we found 4 major problems with this study. The first problem we found was the limited generalizability of the results. Over 90% of the participants in both programs were from a Hispanic background. Moreover, the authors of the study avoided explicitly stating this in their paper. This raises serious questions as to how generalizable these results are to other low-income populations.
The second major problem with this study was the author's use of accuracy as the sole measure of executive functioning improvement. The speed at which children made responses should have also been assessed. It remains unknown whether children in the tools condition simply performed better because they took more time on the tasks compared to children in the control condition. We would therefore suggest that consideration be given to the possible effects of a speed-accuracy trade-off, and that speed of response be statistically controlled for.
The third major problem was the fact that only tools participants were administered academic measurements. These measures were shown to positively correlate with performance on the executive functions tasks. However, it is likely that children in the standard literacy-based curriculum would have performed better than tools children on academic measures testing vocabulary, reading, and language, since this curriculum stressed literacy. By not comparing academic measures between the two groups, the authors of the study were able to hide the possibility that the standard literacy-based curriculum could be superior to the tools curriculum in various academic areas.
The fourth and most major problem with the present research is that no pre-test measures of executive functioning were taken. In the context of the present study, this creates a fatal flaw in the research. The lack of baseline measures makes it impossible to reliably conclude that improvements in executive functioning actually occurred, and further should have prevented the authors from assuming direct comparability between two groups that were not demonstrated to be equivalent prior to treatment. In order to conclude that executive functioning can be taught, the researchers are required to show post-treatment improvement in the tools group, which is not possible within the present dataset. Given the severe limitations associated with this flaw, we have suggested the use of either a classic pretest post-test design or the Solomon 4-group design, both of which would have included a pretest measure of executive functioning.
In the classic pretest post-test design, the total population of participants is randomly divided into 2 samples, the control sample and the experimental sample. Only the experimental sample is exposed to the manipulated variable. The researcher compares the pretest results with the post-test results for both samples. Any divergence between the 2 samples can then be assumed to be a result of the experiment.
In the Solomon 4-group design, the sample is divided into 4 groups. Group A receives the experimental manipulation and is administered both pre- and post-test measures. Unlike Group A, Group B receives no experimental manipulation and is similarly administered both the pre- and post-test measures. Group C, like Group A, receives the experimental treatment and is administered only the post-test measure, while Group D receives no experimental manipulation and is again administered only the post-test measures. This design allows for possible priming and practice effects to be controlled for.
Were either of these experimental designs used, a repeated measures ANOVA could then be conducted as the main statistical analysis. Using this approach, both pre- and post-test results could be compared. This would permit for both within subjects and between group comparisons. Therefore, both group differences and individual differences could be examined. Specifically, in this study, this would have allowed for an investigation into whether improvements in executive functioning were greater for the tools children compared to the standard curriculum children.
In summary, given the design flaws of the current experiment, the authors should have been more cautious about claiming executive functioning improvements in preschool-aged children. A better experimental design would have permitted the researchers to perform a more appropriate statistical analysis and thereby allowed them to make claims regarding the efficacy of this intervention more robust.